All right, so welcome everyone to the inaugural episode, hopefully, of Ask an Otaku, a special show where you get a chance to talk to us and we get a chance to talk to you about otaku topics and what's going on with you and just general questions and stuff about being an otaku. And I am here this week with my special guest host, Nick, who you may recognize from some of our very early collaborations together. And also, I've got over on Skype, I've got our very own Miniman joining us.
We can rebuild him. We can reclaim his love for anime. Da, 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 da.
So we'll be taking.
Otaku fan.
So we will be taking your calls, starting with Mike in the chat room, and Mike actually from our D&D game as well. He's going to be calling in, so go ahead, Mike, give us a call, and we'll find out what he's already with the question. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he's got up his sleeve for us today. So looking forward to that, Mike. The topic of the day that I'm thinking of doing is going to be about what anime you recommend for a first timer. So think about that a little bit while we wait for Mike to call in. Remember, Mike, you're calling Otaku Questions, as you see down there in the bottom. And there is Mike. Hey, Mike. Mike, you there? Uh-oh, sounds like we're having audio problems. Anything, Mike? Uh-oh. I have a bit of an issue with audio here. Yeah, sounds like Mike's having some audio problems. So we're going to go ahead and end the call and wait for him to get that worked out. Once he gets that worked out, he will give us a call. Yes, Digital Bug, what's the question? And you guys can certainly ask questions, too, while in the chat room. So if you're on the chat room, go ahead and ask a question. And it's a good question. Technically speaking, the microphone for today only broadcasts through one audio. So we're trying to do we're trying to figure out that mic problem, but for now, we're going to go forward with the one channel on the audio. It should probably mix down to one channel once it goes out on YouTube. So those of you watching it later should be okay. So what do you guys think? What would be a good anime to recommend to a first timer? Is the question. Yep. There's Mike again. Mike, you there?
Can you hear me?
There we go, Mike. How you doing?
Sorry, my microphone unplugged when I wasn't paying attention.
Gotcha.
So, yeah. My question would be, because another inspiration thing, because I was coding yesterday while you were doing the live show, and I know that you do some coding, and then everyone in the chat talks about games and such and all this stuff, that another stereotype of otaku, like my question last week about sleeping, is that most otakus are nerds, for the most part. And as far as I've seen, that is actually a true stereotype. And I was wondering, like, what are your thoughts on this in the chat room as well, about how, like, why do you think that a lot of otaku are drawn into that kind of thing? I'm not exactly sure how to word it.
Yeah, well, it depends on how you define nerd. I mean, I've always felt that nerd was the more negative stereotype as opposed to, say, geek. I don't know. I mean, well, how would you define nerd, Mike, would be the question.
I would define nerd as just someone who does, like games or the technical stuff, dealing with computers or things like that. A geek, for me, a geek is, someone obsessed.
Yeah.
Or like how you say that the nerd is the worst of the two. For me, the geek is the worst of the two.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're talking about a computer nerd specifically.
Yeah. Well, computer nerds or gaming nerds. It's kind of like the general public eye of a nerd. But almost every otaku that I've met is one of those kind of people, like either coder, someone who's deals with hardware, gamers.
Yeah, someone very computer oriented, digital oriented. It's very true. We have a lot of. I mean, it's kind of remarkable that at cons one of the first things to crop up was a video game room. And it's, it's always got folks who spend the entire con in the video game room, which is not quite true of a lot of the other rooms in a con. But yeah, it's a good question. Why are we? Well, I think one of the reasons we're drawn to it is because anime is so digital these days. Generally the way you find anime these days is either online or through fan subs, torrenting, whatever. And frankly, most folks don't know how to torrent. They don't know how to download torrents. Precious few folks know how to use YouTube, frankly, beyond the basic stuff, or know the other streaming sites. I'm surprised how few otaku know about the legal streaming sites. I keep running across people who are like, "What's Crunchyroll?" Really? So it's a good question. One second, actually. Let's see if we can do something here real quick. There. Try to add Miniman back into the conversation there. But yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, is anime particularly computer oriented? I don't think so. I don't know.
I think most of the established genres are sci-fi based, and I mean,
that's true.
Who are the fans of those things?
Yeah, that's very true. I mean,
Yeah,
the vast majority of anime.
That's another thing that I would say that is not. This isn't like as big of a stereotype, but it's still a big. It's still up there. Is that otaku are at least like half of them or something are sci-fi fans. Like especially if you go to conventions, even the anime convention here, you see a lot of people who are cosplaying as I can't think of any sci-fis right now, but like someone from Star Trek or something. I actually saw that at the con last year.
Yeah.
And it's an anime convention.
Oh yeah.
But it seems that a lot of people are sci-fi fans, and that I think that goes along with the nerd thing is sci-fi.
Yeah, you'll often get a Darth Vader or a Stormtrooper or something like that at an anime con. There was a rather awesome one at Anime Expo a couple years ago, actually, and they did a whole bunch of posing with various characters, which was fun. And I mean, certainly, the large majority of anime is fantasy or science fiction. And for some, so that brings up the question: why are fantasy and science fiction fans generally, computer nerds? Certainly, cyberpunk helps. There's certainly that whole idea of folks wanting to be, basically a neural hacker. They want to do neuromancer. So you've got that as well, but I don't know. Miniman, have you been following along? What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I never really got into the whole sci-fi route. I took very alternative, weird routes to get into anime. So I'm a very weird otaku in that sense, because I did not do the normal anime thing at all. I went from one episode of Bleach to Elf and Lied. I mean, that was a weird way of getting into anime. So, and I only recently became a sci-fi fan. Started watching old episodes of the Twilight Zone because it's freaking epic. Yeah, everyone's a pig. But
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'd say that most of us maybe start as nerds. I'm a huge video game fan, although I do hate everything that's mainstream. But I don't know, really. It's quite hard to say, because the fact is the width and breadth that is the otaku community is rather stupidly diverse. I'd say about like 40% maybe start sci-fi.
Yeah, that's certainly true. And you look at the whole, boys love subculture, and that's certainly not science fiction or fantasy oriented. You'll have some stories where it's, I'm an angel or whatever, but it's typically or a demon, one of the two, or a vampire. Yes, sorry, one of the three. Yeah. But most of the boys love titles are, I work, as a writer, as a journalist, it's very, very normal stuff. So there's lots of non-science fiction. But yeah, there certainly are a lot of science fiction story. I mean, look at some of the most popular anime. You know, Dragon Ball Z, Cowboy Bebop, Tenchi. You know, you name those big ones. They tend to be big science fiction or fantasy storylines. So they're certainly pointing folks at it. What was that?
And plus the big ones that Oh, you first.
They're and so then that also means, like, as Mayman said, he went to sci-fi out of anime. So
yeah.
then, what, like, other than the whole fantasy thing, what do you think would tie them in? Because for the most part, I've watched, like, the entire Star Trek series, all that stuff. The fantasy and science fiction feels different in anime than it does in very different than in sci-fi and anime.
Yeah.
So it's just, I don't see how they correlate that people go from one to the other.
Well, I think they correlate in the sense that I think, you know, generally speaking, science fiction or fantasy fans, they're not necessarily looking for Western science fiction. They're not necessarily looking for Western fantasy. They're just looking for a neat story involving, you know, fantastic worlds and things. And if that happens to be El Hazard, or it happens to be Tolkien, or whatever, then that's fine. So I think it has the advantage being science fiction and fantasy, that because it is just something different. You know, I think it's one of the reasons why, you know, sports anime don't do well over here, because, you know, sports fans are looking for the sports themselves, not looking for a cartoon about the sport. Especially not one like Dando. But yeah, I mean, it's.
Well, I would watch a Prince of Badminton anime. That would be so good.
Prince of Badminton.
Why no badminton animes?
I'm sure there's one.
Bruce Barker had a 20-second montage.
There's got to be. I actually watched the live stage show of Prince of Tennis. That's an odd experience. I just have to tell you. And it's a musical.
Yeah, that's too.
You know,
not as bad as watching the live stage show of Bleach. That was awesome.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's
so weird. So cool. Everyone has stupidly dressed badly.
Yeah.
Greatest experience ever.
Yeah, it's one of the problems with a lot of the anime series is, you know, those costumes aren't really meant to be worn. You know, they're not meant to be physically possible. So no, it doesn't really work. But
it's like every time you see a Photoshop version of Keanu Reeves as Spike Spiegel, you just go, man!
Does not work.
Yeah.
But yeah, and actually, Tim in the chat room brings up a good point about video games. That video games is also a big crossover.
I was about to ask that.
Yeah. And since I don't play video games, what do you guys think? I mean, do you think video games have been a major crossover point for fans?
I know as a little kid, I always played. Like, I think I got my first computer when I was 2. I got my Game Boy when I was 5.
Wow.
And I've been playing video games pretty much since then. Like Legend of Zelda, all those kind of things that actually really feel anime-ish.
Yeah.
Like Ocarina of Time.
Ever watched the cartoon?
No.
Yeah.
True.
Ocarina of Time, it feels like it's not exactly like an anime, but it feels anime-ish, but more in a Western sense. And just all that kind of stuff. I mean, those kind of games like the RPGs, Final Fantasy, that definitely can correlate. But then I see a lot of people, people talking in chat every now and then. They talk about like Portal, which I don't see where that ties in anywhere.
I don't see that either.
Minecraft and shooter games. That I don't play shooter games, so I really have no idea about them.
Yeah. The shooter games don't seem to me particularly anime-like. Unless you're playing that one toy shooter game we were talking about a few months ago, where you play like Figmas. They're running around shooting each other. Microvolts. There we go.
Yeah, Microvolts.
Yeah, but you know it's true, and you know, they had the advantage, or just the situation in the video game world where you know, there's been so much Japanese content that it just made a lot of financial sense to port that over here. So we just got a lot of anime style artwork in the games, especially on, you know, Nintendo or Sega Saturn, whatever. People just got used to because they were just there in the games, and you kind of couldn't avoid it. I think that you're right. That certainly helped it a lot.
Well, recently, I mean, lots of companies, especially Konami with Arc System Works, have noticed that Western gamers, a lot of them like anime now, and a lot of them have started realising that have actually started making games specifically for that. I mean, Blaze Blue being one of them. Blaze Blue was done in anime style, and recently they reinvented Contra as an anime. I mean, that was a pretty bold step because it's Contra. But I mean, and it's awesome, but it's the case of, I think that what happened was that we got all that Japanese content, and then it sort of built up a fan base just like sort of Otakuism did, and then I think it was that almost that now it's going to be bridge gaps to anime because more games are trying to bridge gap. I mean, Valkyria Chronicles, stuff like that, and I think probably that's more the case that it's going to become bridge gap, but you still got like a year or two, and then you'll start seeing bridge gaps.
Miniman, you're a gamer as far as I know. Why do you think that you the correlation, you like games, you like anime, why do you think that both these things appeal to you and that you like both of them, I'm gonna guess, equally?
Because I'm weird. In Britain, I mean, in Britain, if you watch anime, you're weird. If you play the type of games I play in Britain, you're weird. I mean, I've always hated doing stuff the same as everyone else. And along comes anime, and no one watched anime, and there goes me watching anime. I mean, but it's like, I don't know, I think it's just, there's an ambiguity to it all. There's a bizarreness to some of these Japanese games, like, the pure there's escapism and there's super escapism, and anime and some Japanese video games are super escapist. I mean, for example, I can watch the film Blade Runner, and I'm in this escapist zone, and it's all quite cool, and is that person a robot or is he? But I could then go and watch some like Ghost in the Shell, and I'll be like completely blown away by the fact that it looks completely different to everything else, and there's a guy who stuffed a submachine gun with anti-tank around. To me, that's cool. That is still one of my favourite mixes ever. No, it's more just, and I just gradually grew a love for just random, ambiguous stupidity. Ninja Gaiden 2 is awesome, and you'll never see anything like that in in even the most escapist of escapist things, because it's just purely super ridiculous, and it's probably just my love for being completely and utterly weird and just being so compulsive that I would happily just kick open the door and start an SOS brigade right now.
That brings up a really interesting...
I've tried that already.
That actually brings up a very interesting point, is that there's a... I know one of the reasons I got into anime and manga is because it was obscure, because it was different and something that a lot of folks hadn't been in. How many of you guys, and I'm asking the chat room particularly, since the rest of us agree, have you guys gotten into this because partly it was different, it was unusual, it was something that was not common? I think that's common for a lot of geeks and nerds, is that a lot of times we get into this because it is different, because it is something that it's we kind of reject or we were rejected by the mainstream one way or the other, and so there's that question of are we getting into this because we see ourselves as fringe? Yeah, so we've got some folks in the chat room who are like that as well. I wouldn't call us all hipsters.
That's really not true.
Yeah, if we were hipsters, we would actually be making awesome trends. We generally, unfortunately, we don't do that because we aren't buying anyway. That's a whole other argument.
You guys would have a lot of laser discs and, and soundtracks on LP and things like that.
Yeah, very, very different. That's an interesting question. That's an interesting point too. Is that I think Toonami is what got a lot of folks in, as just making it kind of a normal, weekday afternoon thing.
Yeah, I think you also go ahead.
When I first, besides Pokemon and watching Princess Mononoke as a little child, what introduced me to anime, not really what got me in, was Toonami and Adult Swim, like Fully Cooley, Paranoia Agent, Ghost in the Shell. All those were showing on those things, and then I I was able to go on the internet more often. Like back in '06, I saw Haruhi as it was airing, and that just pulled me straight into Otakudom.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's true.
Ironically, I was actually introduced to anime via Nintendo magazine.
Oh, okay.
I saw one screenshot of the Bleach game, and it was a guy with a fox for a head beating a poor innocent girl dressed in pink to death, and I went, yes, I shall look for that.
But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us do get into this because it is certainly different. In the same way that a lot of folks got into House. House is not a typical doctor show or hospital show, and which is one of the reasons it makes it awesome. You kind of hate House for most of those episodes, and it's definitely a different thing. And a lot of us, I think, are science fiction fantasy fans, or at least science fiction. I don't know about. There doesn't seem to be a huge amount of crossover between like the hardcore fantasy group and anime and such. I mean, they tend to be off in their own little world reading books. Yeah. Which is fine. It's just interesting that really hasn't connected over. I think fantasy is one of those things that gets that is more Western, where when you get into fantasy, you get into a particular mode of story, and you might get into say Berserk, because that is more sort of a Western setup, Western world, or Lotus War, which is D&D. So hey. But a lot of the other fantasy, Gwyn Saga, kind of weird. Lots of those fantasy things where folks just aren't going to get into it quite as much. It's also interesting seeing what folks.
Young fantasy fans.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that young fantasy fans seem to have the most imagination, they seem to be the hardest to get into. Just, oh, I love you, Harry Potter. Hey, do you want to see Karen O'Girkai? Get out of my house! Best demon voice I can do. I can do it lower.
No, it's true. Yeah. I mean, there are. It's harder too for kids because kids will grab onto the one franchise, and that's and it could be anything, and that would be their franchise. And fantasy or vampires or zombies or whatever they decide to is their thing. Because kids aren't mature. Say what? Anyway. Okay. Like zombies, 'cause they're cool. Zombies are fun if used properly. But it is very different. Naruto is a good example. Naruto is not something that's going to attract the typical fantasy fan. But it is.
That's interesting because I was thinking about that tradition of shonen manga and shonen stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much starting from Dragon Ball on, we have really strange worlds and sort of fantasy element, but then we have an I don't know what element, sort of a shonen, let's beat the crap out of everything element. It's weird. I don't know, but you're right that there are no. I mean, the mainstays of anime are not fantasy things. There is no equivalent to Gundam. That's some fantasy thing. There's nothing like that. There's Macross, Gundam. They're all giant robot shows. I mean, Ideon, Gao Gaigar, etc.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of
the thing about Shonen is the regular character is always someone sort of that at the sort of right time you sort of want to be. You sort of want to have that I can do it all. I have friends, and if I work towards something, I can be God. Like it's just that case, like, with early Shonen, it is literally just, like, it comes with the message, you can do anything if you put some work into it. And if I don't put some work into it, you will get beaten at the beginning of the fight, but win in the end anyway.
Yeah, no kidding.
You say that, like, we might get into it because we just get into it because it's weird. I don't know if I did that. I've always been one of the kids at the school to reject the norm. Like, I would gather my friends and play tag on campus just for the heck of it. Where we'd all be running around, everyone would look at us like we're crazy. And I also do parkour, which definitely isn't the norm. I've always been
tried to, but failed.
I've always been a weird
Falling down
kid,
the back of a capital shed is not a good way to start your story.
Lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, I've always been a weird kid, but I don't think I got into it just because it was weird. I mean, I didn't even really know it was weird until I got into it, and then I noticed everyone else thought it was weird. I'm like, oh, really?
Oh, interesting. Okay. So what was it that attracted you about it to get you into initially?
Well, I know watching Fully Cooley, I was just kind of felt like I was in an acid trip, and it was a good laugh with my friend when he'd spend the night. We watched Adult Swim, and then there was Ghost in the Shell, which was just epic. Oh yeah. There's really no way other to explain it. When I was 14, I don't know, 14 or 15, it was just.
You used to watch Ghost in the Shell, yeah.
Then watching Paranoia Agent.
Nope, I think we lost Mike again.
That it can be. What? No, sorry. Watching Paranoia Agent is what got me to like realize, because most anime I've seen, I didn't know it was called anime until I watched Hairhe, but most anime I've seen would be like, the goofy little things that they show that you would easily show to kids. I would think, and that might actually be a reason why some people dismiss anime, is because it just looks goofy.
Yeah.
But then watching Paranoia Agent
does not look goofy.
It's definitely not goofy. And then after I watched Hairhe, that was my first fan sub. And just, I don't know what it was about it, but it just drew me in, because I found it on YouTube. I was just looking up music, and then I found this AMV, which I didn't know what it was, and just saw it. I'm like, hey, this looks interesting. I looked it up, watched it, and then just from there, I learned the name anime, started looking up more stuff about anime, found out about Otaku, found out about like Lucky Star was the next one after that, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks very much for the question, Mike. That was a good one.
It was a pleasure to be on.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the issues here, technically, is that as soon as I switch off one call, that cuts off everyone on the call, which is not the way I'd like to do it, but we'll see if we can figure out that technically at some point here. So, Black Swan, you wanted to call with a question? Go ahead and give me a call as we continue to think about that.
Yes, I was consistently losing the video feed.
There are occasionally, depending on your connection and so forth, you can the video feed can sort of start to collapse. So chat room too can be a little funky at times. Depends on how things are going. Actually, I'm having a bit of network problems right now, so we'll see what happens. Hopefully we can keep that going. But yeah, and it's actually one other interesting thing is that it used to be, like I think I mentioned at one point, when I got into anime, there was everyone got into anime through Robotech or Akira. You could ask anyone, and that was what got them into anime. And now in the chat room, everyone got into it through something different. It's a much more diverse otakudom. It's just the way of it.
Well, I think past 04.
Yeah.
When you had a mounting fan sub boom.
Yeah.
That was sort of.
Yeah.
What started letting the cat out of the box is, oh, okay, here's all this weird, obscure stuff that nobody has ever heard of.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, I'm the one guy who has all the VHS tapes of Rurouni Kenshin in 2001, and I put together this AMV.
Yeah.
Or something like that. It's, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a very different thing. You don't need to friend me on Skype. You can just call me directly. I've set it up to allow that. So go ahead and just call Otaku Questions directly, and it should go right in. Just type in that, and it should be ready to go.
All right.
Yeah. Boy, we can't repeat this on the Ustream or on the YouTube. But anyway.
No, we can, but we won't.
Well, yeah, we can, but we won't. But yes, there are a lot more vectors into otakudom now, and it helps. Like we were saying earlier, having things like Toonami helped a lot. Having Pokemon and Digimon and all those shows on helped a lot. We didn't have those 5 or 10 years prior. There was Dragon Ball Z. I remember Dragon Ball Z aired at 8 a.m. every weekday before it got on Toonami. Good luck, Monday through Friday. Good luck, getting a chance to watch that. You're off to school by that point. So it's very frustrating. Very frustrating. So Black Swan's having some difficulty with Skype. Anyone else want to ask a question while he's working that out? Yeah.
I think it was before 8 a.m. because I used to watch Dragon Ball Z in the morning on weekends. Then it got picked up by Cartoon Network.
Yeah.
So.
Like, this is a lot easier now. But, yeah. So any other questions? Anything else from the from the chat room? Oh, Tim, you want to call in? Go ahead. Actually, Big Red, question is about do most people in America ignore voice actors? Actually, I would say that we all certainly know about voice actors. We usually have our favorites, whether we're dub or sub people. Certainly in the past year or two, we've had a fair amount of material. Folks are more aware of names of either Vic Mignogna, Crispin Freeman, or on the other side, some of the other Japanese voice actors. So, Wendy Lee, all those others.
Yeah. They sort of get ignored, but I mean,